Outsourcing tends to have a bad reputation as being low quality. Partner Hero's value-based approach raises the bar for the outsourcing industry by investing in employee empowerment and career growth, paying above-market salaries, and maintaining a focus on quality and performance. They're more than a service provider. They're also a thought partner for the startups they serve. It's simple. Brands that care about quality customer experience choose Partner Hero. They offer flexible terms and the ability to scale quickly, perfect for startups, with quality assurance baked into every program and offices around the world. So Partner Hero can provide truly global coverage. Outsourcing has long been available mainly to big businesses, but Partner Hero is challenging business as usual by bringing the benefits of outsourcing to businesses of all sizes with short, flexible contracts and fast ramp-up times. 10 years ago, when we were launching the Action Catalyst, we could have used a few extra hands to help us scale quickly, even if it was just for a short while. You can bet that with their expertise, fast onboarding, and core focus on quality, Partner Hero would have had our attention. If you're ready to bring in outside customer support help for your startup that feels like it's a part of an existing team, check out Partner Hero. Head over to partnerhero.com/Action Catalyst to book a free consultation with our solutions team. Mention you heard about Partner Hero from the Action Catalyst, and they'll even waive the setup fee. Now, on to the show.
From Nashville, Tennessee, Southwestern Family of Companies welcomes you to the Action Catalyst. Each week, we share insights and inspiration from movers and shakers in the world of business. Our goal is to help you increase your self-discipline, overcome procrastination, and help you to take action on all the things that really matter.
Peak performance, ultra performer, top producer. These are terms that we talk about, our guests seem to talk about. We share this idea of just sort of maximizing your potential or reaching the pinnacle of what's possible and pushing the limits. It's been a real consistent theme here on the show. And today we are talking with an MBA skills trainer named Alan Stein. So this is somebody who works with professional athletes, prepares them physically, mentally for the game. He's got a business partner that he works with too, but it's just Alan that's here today. But we're talking about that. I'm going to talk to Alan, interview, and ask him about how do they prepare somebody for the NBA. And then afterwards, I'm going to draw this parallel and connection, something that we've never really talked about on this show. I'm going to introduce to you what is called the habits triangle. It's part of the secret sauce of Southwestern history. It's part of our magic methodology for how we've been around for 160 plus years. And we take every coaching client through it, and I'm going to explain how it all fits together, this sort of process of creating ultra performance, and then also lay out for you sort of sequentially 6 steps for how this can happen and draw some parallels from what Alan was talking about. So it's a fantastic episode, applies to everybody and anybody who is trying to achieve the next level. I know you're going to love it. Don't miss out. Stay tuned. We'll get started just after this message.
This episode is sponsored by Southwestern Coaching. Southwestern Coaching has helped over 11,000 people increase their incomes by over 25% on average. As a successful salesperson, you know the importance of increasing your sales, but sometimes you might just need a little extra push and accountability to meet your goals and grow your business. Southwestern Coaching will help you increase your income through one-on-one sales and leadership coaching tailored specifically to your needs. Together, we will elevate sales. To schedule your free one-on-one business action planning session with a Southwestern coach, go to www.southwesternconsulting.com/action catalyst.
Who we're talking to today is Alan Stein. He's been the director of performance for Pure Sweat Basketball, and basically for 15 years has been working with elite high school, college, and NBA players for, doing things for like the Nike Skills Academy, the McDonald's All-American Game, the Jordan Brand Classic, the NBA Players Association Top 100. And, that's what Pure Sweat does. And he has a business partner named Drew, and Drew does a lot of the skill work with the players. And then Alan does a lot of the performance work, which we're going to talk about. He has since moved into sort of the speaking world and doing training and so forth. So we wanted to talk about the high the habits of high performers. So Alan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to a fun conversation.
So when you think about preparing somebody, to compete in the NBA, I know one of the things that you talk about is this sort of like pyramid concept. And, I think it's sort of a daunting task to go, wow, how do you prepare someone to compete in the NBA? And here you guys are working with those people or have been working with those people on a regular basis. And I think you talk about this sort of pyramid that you guys work through. You mind sharing that with us?
Absolutely. I mean, for the players on court, for basketball players, in order for a player to be the best player that they're capable of, we look at 4 different components. The bottom of the pyramid, the base, the foundation for the whole thing happens to be my area of expertise, which is their body and improving their athleticism, improving their ability to move efficiently on the court and to remain as injury-free as possible. Then we go one level up, which is the area my business partner, Drew Hanlon, specializes in, which is skill acquisition. It doesn't matter how athletic a player is. If they can't shoot, pass, rebound, defend, or handle the ball, then it really doesn't matter. Then we go up one more level and we start talking about the mind, which is 2 separate areas we want to look at. One, we want to make sure a player has the mental toughness and fortitude to compete every day, but we also want to make sure they have a very high basketball IQ, that they know how and when to use their skills and their athleticism to be as effective as possible. And then the apex of the pyramid is their heart. That's their grit, their passion, their motor, if you will. And we've found that when you can improve a player in those 4 distinct areas, almost like you're putting together a jigsaw puzzle, you'll create the best basketball player that they're capable of becoming.
Mm-hmm. So like, where do you start? So do you start at the bottom and sort of work your way up? Like, do you start with athleticism or do you kind of start working on all 4 like at the same time, or like, is it sequential or?
It is rather sequential. Now, when we say working on their strength and conditioning in their body, when most people hear strength and conditioning, they usually envision a player, doing a bench press or have a barbell on their back and doing squats. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about improving their coordination and their balance, their motor control, their proprioception, just getting them in touch with their body. And we do that with very young players. I mean, I'll do events that have kids that are 7 or 8 years old where we're teaching them movement patterns. Do they have rhythm and coordination in their feet and working on their footwork? So really just teaching them how to control their body. Because as you can imagine, if a player can't control their body, if they can't start and stop and jump and land and move forwards and backwards, they're going to have a lot of difficulty doing fine motor skills like shooting and passing and ball handling. So yes, we address the body first, and then we level up and we start teaching them the skills of the game. And that will be rudimentary skills. Here's how you make a bounce pass. Here's how you dribble between your legs. Then the next layer is the IQ portion, which is to teach them. So it's one thing to know how to make a bounce pass. It's another to know when to make a bounce pass. So how do they apply their skills and their athleticism? And then in all honesty and in full humility and transparency, the top, the apex and the heart, that's the one I believe that we as coaches have the least impact on. That needs to come from the players. Now we can motivate, we can inspire, we can model the fact that we love what we do and we're passionate about coaching. But at the end of the day, a player has to want to be the best player that they're capable of. So when we get all the way to the top, that's almost when we pass the baton to the player and say, okay, now how bad do you want it? We've given you the raw materials and the tools to be as good as you can be. Now you need to actualize it.
So do you think that I think that gets to the question, which is relevant. Obviously, most of us listening here, we're not going to probably make a run at playing in the NBA, but that gets at the question of, do you think ultra performers are made or are they born? Because I think there's a lot of parallels here, which is kind of what I thought would be interesting is, competing and making it to the level of NBA is not, I would think there's a lot of parallels here to anything that we're doing. So are you saying you think that they are born more than they're made, or like, what's your take on that?
in the world of athleticism, you certainly have to be born with certain genetic predispositions that would give you the potential to compete at that level. And here's what I tell young players all the time, and I say it with a friendly smile. If I'm talking to a group of young players, I'll say, every single one of you has the potential to make it to the NBA. However, less than 0.5% of you have the potential to make it as a player. And the point being that, most players that are using sports as a vehicle to learn life lessons, I mean, they can still make it to the NBA, but they'd have to make it as a coach or a referee, or heck, maybe even as an owner or a general manager. So if their goal is to make their living in the game of basketball and be in the NBA, I want them to go after that with everything that they have. But the reality for most normal human beings is they weren't born with the athletic tools to play in the NBA. And I don't ever say that to discourage or diminish a player. I want them to go after that. I mean, shoot, I'm 41 years old. When I was 8, I thought I was going to play in the NBA, and I went after it with everything I could. And it just wasn't in the cards. But so I don't want players to be discouraged from going for their goal. But you have to realize that a guy like a LeBron James or a Kevin Durant, those guys were born with certain tools that most people weren't born with. However, and this is a big however, that is not to take away from the work ethic and the habits and grit that players like LeBron and KD have. Just because they were born with some physical tools doesn't automatically give them the gold ticket to the NBA. Kevin Durant's not the only 6'10" guy walking around. There's plenty of them who didn't actualize their potential, who didn't create habits, who didn't do the things that they needed to do. So a guy like LeBron or KD was born with the raw materials to make it to that level, and yet they've worked incredibly hard, incredibly smart, and with tremendous consistency in order to make that happen.
So do you think that carries over to the corporate world too? I mean, so the only thing is, like, what about like Spud Webb, right? I mean, Spud Webb is from maybe the 80s or 90s, like this tiny guy from the Atlanta Hawks, and won the dunk contest. I mean, he was super small. I mean, he didn't have there's people like that sort of defy the physical tools, or would you say no, he had other physical tools that enabled that to happen?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, without question, he's the exception to the rule when you look at the average height of players in the NBA. But Spud Webb and Muggsy Bogues and Earl Boykins and some of the other players that were on the shorter side certainly had so many other physical tools to allow them to be able to play at that level. Even take a player like Stephen Curry. I mean, he's one of the top players in the game, arguably the best shooter in the game. And when you just look at him, just standing there, he looks like a normal guy. He has a normal frame. I mean, he's a little bit taller than the average male, but he doesn't pass the eye test the way that a LeBron James does. However, when you really look at athleticism, I mean, Stephen Curry was born with some pretty good genetic hookups. I mean, his hand-eye coordination, his balance. I mean, we can't just look at height and one's ability to jump or run as the only barometers of athletic success. I mean, these guys can do so many other things. Steve Nash is another one. Steve Nash is one of my all-time favorite players, and most novice fans would not consider him a great athlete because he wasn't a high flyer or a dunker. Well, if you take all of the other areas of athleticism, his mobility, his reaction, his hand-eye coordination, his conditioning level, I mean, Steve Nash would rate off of the charts in those other areas. So even though Steve Nash may look like a normal guy and he's not winning dunk contests, he is in the upper, 0.01 percentile of the human population when it comes to athleticism. And so I think to answer your question, it is both. Certainly not every player that's currently on an NBA roster was born with just unbelievable genetic gifts. Lots of people have been able to overcome certain deficiencies because they've had an exceptional skill. If you can flat out shoot the ball, that will make up for maybe a lack of some natural athleticism that you don't have. And I would say the same is true for being a high performer in any vocation. I mean, certainly if you're going to be a world-class singer, it would help for you to be born with the tools that would make you privy to being a world-class singer. But that doesn't mean that you can't be an incredibly successful salesperson or CEO or entrepreneur. So that's why I love the transition from sport to business, because it's less reliant on one's genetics and or athleticism.
So basically, I mean, one interesting thing about what you said there is you said it is genetics, but it's not just the obvious. It's not just height or strength or speed or ability to jump. There's other things, balance, eye coordination, that like reaction, time, things that people don't think of. So I think that's powerful, is to go, hey, just it's not just the surface things, but there's other things, but it is still a part of it is innate. So when you make the when you look over then to the business world, do you think that same rule applies, that it's like, to compete at the highest level, I mean, to be a Fortune 100 CEO, is there certain a genetic predisposition that is necessary to make it to that level? Or are you saying in the business world, it's more of an equal playing field?
I'm going to say it's both. And I don't say that to back out of an answer. I do think that there are some inherent traits that one can be born with that will improve their chances of being successful in that arena. Not everyone was born, with the academic IQ of a Warren Buffett or a Steve Jobs. Not everyone was born with the inherent leadership skills that some of the best leaders, like a Coach K, Duke basketball, may have. So I do think there are certain traits and talents that one can be born with that will greatly increase their chances of being successful. But I also think a good portion of what's needed are skills, and skills can be developed, and they're developed through repetition and through training and practicing with purpose. So I do believe it's both. Do I think every human being born has the potential to be a Fortune 100 CEO? No, I do not. Do I think a good portion of people can develop the skills that will put them in a position to be able to hold jobs like that? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fascinating question to think about. So what about let's talk about the people who lack some of those deficiencies. And you see, okay, so like you mentioned, there are you can overcome some deficiency by something, right? Some people do that. So in the cases where you see that happen, perhaps maybe at the MBA and then also translating it, is there anything in common in terms of maybe the habits that you see of the people who you go, like on the surface, you go, gosh, that person doesn't really come off, like you mentioned, Steve Nash, doesn't look like they have the genetic predisposition to be doing what they're doing. Or in the business world, you go, gosh, that person doesn't really seem to have kind of like the natural charisma to be a great salesperson or a great leader. But somehow they rise above that. Somehow they overcome that. Somehow they break through that. Are there any sort of commonalities that you would say you see in athletes that sort of get them over that hump?
Yeah, there's two in particular that come to mind. One, it's the habits and mindsets, rituals, routines, and disciplines that they have during the unseen hours. It's what they're doing when the proverbial cameras aren't on that really determines whether or not they'll be successful. Because at some level, we all have to appreciate the fact that our habits are a choice, and our habits are what dictate whether or not we're successful in any endeavor. Our success is not predicated on things we do when we feel like it, when it's convenient, or when we want to. Our success is predicated on the things that we do every single day. So the people that create incredibly strong and positive work habits and are consistent with those are going to outperform and outachieve most other people. And the other is high performers and high achievers have a relentless thirst for development. They are always looking to get an advantage and always looking to learn, to grow, to develop, to sharpen their sword and master their craft. A friend of mine named Michael Burt, who was a former basketball coach and is now in the business world as well, he coined a term that I love called execution gap. An execution gap is the difference between what we know we're supposed to do and what we actually do. And every one of us has an execution gap. I mean, take physical fitness. Everybody knows what they need to do to work out and to eat right, but how many people actually do that? That's an execution gap, and we all have it. Well, the highest performers and the highest achievers, and for that matter, the happiest people on the planet, have narrowed their execution gap to almost nothing. They know what they're supposed to do, and they actually do it. And to me, that's the big equalizer, is what you do in the unseen hours, how bad you have the desire to improve and get better. And if you can close that execution gap, there's no reason why you can't be excellent in sales or excellent as a leader if you're willing to work on those skill sets. And then if you take talents that you're born with and add it to that, then you're a superstar.
Our core business is coaching salespeople. So we are on a daily basis, typically coaching them through some type of call reluctance or creative avoidance or distraction or, lack of confidence, all these various different issues. But at the end of the day, it comes down to doing the things you're supposed to do when you don't feel like doing it. So, but I am curious on your perspective, if you go, okay, how do you do it? How do you get yourself to do those things you're supposed to do when you don't feel like doing it?
From an accountability standpoint, I believe that as human beings, whenever the spotlight is off, we're always going to revert back to bad behavior. So from an accountability standpoint, we need to put systems in place that always keep the spotlight on us. So for instance, if I'm looking to change a habit, I want to start reading for 30 minutes every night before I go to bed. It's in my best interest to share that with as many people as possible, especially the people in my inner circle, my family, my friends, my close colleagues. Even in today's day and age, share it on social media. Put it out there and let everyone know that this is a habit that you're trying to establish, because now the people that really care about you will help hold you accountable. So tomorrow, you and I are chit-chatting, and you say, hey, Alan, did you do your reading last night? What did you read? Tell me about what book you're into, whatever. But now I'm going to have lots of people holding me accountable. And one of the worst emotions that any of us can ever feel is disappointing somebody else. So when you've put it out there that you're going to change this habit to a lot of people, and they're constantly checking in with you and holding you accountable to see if you're doing it, in order to not disappoint them, and for me to say, Rory, I didn't read last night. It's a way to keep that spotlight on you and hold you to the fire while you stick with that habit. And then the beautiful part about habits, research shows that it can take as little as 21 days, sometimes as much as 6 to 8 months to groove a new habit, depending on, the depth of the habit, but it's still a finite period of time. So the key is put systems in place to get the people that care about you to hold the spotlight on you for say 3 weeks to 6 months, and you'll have formed that new habit. And then you can move on to another habit that you'd like to improve.
I love it. Alan Stein is who you are listening to. And Alan, where do you want people to go if they want to connect with you?
You can go to alansteinjr.com. That's ALANSTEINJR.com. And I'm also at Alan Stein Jr. on all social handles.
Well, I appreciate it, brother, and appreciate the insight here. I like the spotlight analogy a lot. I think that is great. And so we appreciate you coming on, man. We wish you all the best.
Thank you. Likewise.
It's an interesting perspective, and that's part of what we have. I feel like we've had this theme of happening where we've got, we've had Navy SEALs come on the show and business leaders and high-performing athletes, and we're really trying to get at and look, like the theme of this mental conditioning and getting to peak performance. And it seems like that theme has been going on here with several of the guests, and I'm really drawing to it because I love that concept of the execution gap that Alan was talking about. It's just the difference between what you should do and what you actually do. And that is what it comes down to, right? Is there is some space there in each of the different areas of our lives for all of us. It's often not knowing, at least at a basic level, it's often not knowing what we should do. That's the problem. It's getting ourselves to do it. The psychology of how to get yourselves to do the things you should be doing, even when you don't feel like doing. And I thought it was interesting to hear his perspective of how do you take an NBA athlete and build them, so to speak, from the ground up, and kind of starting with the body and then the skills and then the mind and the heart. And what I was thinking about, I was actually, when I went back and I was listening to this in my head, I was processing, how would you do the same thing with like a business person? Or, obviously a salesperson sales is our core world around Southwestern Consulting, and thinking about even our coaching clients, like what's almost like the process that we take them through at a high level if we had to kind of say, okay, this is it. And of course, we have our whole methodology centers around something called the habits triangle. And it's this concept of what you have is a top producer, an ultra performer, is made up of 3 components, and each one is one of the different legs of the triangle. And the one of the legs is skills. And he was talking about that, right? That's the skills of whatever it is that you are doing. In their case, it's rebounding, it's passing, it's dribbling, it's shooting. In the case of a salesperson, when we talk about skills, it's how to ask for the sale, it's how to answer objections, how to ask for referrals, presentation skills, how to get past gatekeepers. Those are all the skills that we teach when we are coaching somebody. But only about a third of our curriculum is related to skills. Another third is what we call the systems. So systems is like your time management and organizing your day and following up with your leads. And it might be related to your CRM and tracking your activity, your critical success factors. And, we kind of talk about the processes and the workflow that drive your business, because if you don't have those, you could just be a disorganized mess, even if you're really talented. And then the other third of our triangle is self-motivation. And that is really the mindset piece. That's really, talking about the mental toughness, the mental conditioning. And it's just sort of interesting that, whether you're talking to a Navy SEAL or people who play professional sports or coach people in professional sports, or you're talking about salespeople, we do the same thing with leaders, right? It's the same is true. You got systems and you've got, sort of self-motivation, but then you also have, skills. They're just different. It's recruiting skills and running a meeting and how to fire people and how to hire people and how to interview and how to train somebody and all of these skills of leaders. But that's what we call at Southwestern Consulting as our habits triangle. So we have skills, systems, and self-motivation. And then in the center of our triangle is habits. And habits. And I think that's where we're really aligned with what Alan is talking about here, is you have to create these daily habits. And so the way that our diagram shapes out, I know you're listening, so on audio, just kind of picture a triangle with a circle in it. The circle, it says habits inside the triangle, but then there's a circle around the outside of the entire diagram, kind of connecting all the points of the triangle, but in a circular shape. And that is accountability. Accountability is what you need to reinforce the skills, the systems, the self-motivation, and ultimately the habits. And that is why, and maybe you've never even connected the dots on this, that is why our core business is one-on-one coaching at Southwestern Consulting, is because of exactly what he was talking about there, which is, it's at the end of the day, there is something powerful about not letting other people down, and something powerful about having somebody hold you accountable. And basically at Southwestern Consulting, we're like fitness trainers for salespeople and for leaders. We are just like your fitness trainer is cheering you on, teaching you, but also holding you accountable. That is what we're doing. We're like your partner, cheering you on and holding you accountable. That's our diagram. Is, we call it the habits triangle. And that's how we sort of think about it. But that is sort of equal. There's equal parts there, and it's intentionally sort of designed that it's not that one part is more important than the other. You need to have great habits in all 3 areas: skills, systems, and self-motivation. You have to have great habits in all 3 of those areas in order to be a performer, which is why you need accountability around the outside. It's like the whole ecosystem is accountability, is making sure that you get it done. But I also thought it was kind of interesting when I asked Alan the question, does it happen all at once or does it happen in sort of a linear fashion? I was sort of surprised that he said they kind of focus on a linear fashion. And because it's kind of like you have to be doing all the parts, they all kind of fire together. But if I had to describe the process in a linear fashion, like our habits triangle it's an overview of how it all fits together, but it's not necessarily a linear sort of step-by-step process that we would take somebody through to become an ultra performer and to sort of reach their peak potential in their life. And so I thought, well, gosh, let me see if I can try to parallel for you what we do, the process that we actually take clients through, because that's another thing that's interesting to get the perspective where, you have people like the world's highest performing athletes, they all have coaches. And very often their coaches, they're being coached by people who understand what they do. They've done what they do, but maybe not even to the level they've done it, right? Like there's not a lot of professional coaches who were also the athletes, or that were not like in the Hall of Fame. I think there's only one, maybe two examples of professional coaches. In fact, maybe somebody can do a research for this and post this at our blog and tell us how many professional athletes or how many Hall of Fame athletes also coached a championship team in one of the major sports. And I know of one off the top of my head, which is Mike Ditka, but see if you can find any other examples. So there's lots of people who have played the sport, they understand the game, but they're coaching other people. Well, I think that's very similar to us. Our coaches happen to be top performers. They were all top salespeople. They have that proven experience, but a lot of times they're coaching salespeople who are in different industries. And so that is just kind of something that we do, even though maybe somebody hasn't been a top performer in the real estate industry, they were a top performer in the mortgage industry, the insurance industry, but it's the same principles that apply. So, but anyways, I wanted to sort of break this down sequentially and kind of think through if we had to do it systematically or sequentially or logically in an order, what is the process, just debriefing that we take people through? And I think the very first thing that we do, and he didn't really talk about this, I guess it's kind of inherent, though, to anybody who's pursuing the MBA. But for us, we start with the vision, is figuring out, okay, what is somebody's vision? What do they want, right? Like, what is their dream come true? What is their perfect life? What is that achievement that they want to check off? And we start with that. And you hear me say this a lot. The amount of our endurance is directly proportionate to the clarity of our vision. The amount of our endurance is directly proportionate to the clarity of our vision. And so we believe in vision, and we talk about, we take people through this process of several different things of creating their own personal vision. Then from there, I think we do talk a lot about mental conditioning, and this is where they don't necessarily happen in this order. They don't really. They can happen in different orders. It depends on what a person's strengths and weaknesses are. That's part of what we believe in, and we try to teach leaders to do is you don't necessarily train everybody the exact same way. It's more like some people have strengths in one area and weakness in another area, and so you want to kind of like train according to them. But for us, the mental conditioning, what we would refer to as mental conditioning, is positive self-talk. And that is a huge part of what we have to dramatically change for people that we're coaching, is their self-talk, what they are saying about themselves. And it's incredible how people say, oh yeah, I'm not good at that, or I don't like doing that, or I'm terrible with names, or I don't like asking for referrals, or I don't want to be a top performer, and just stupid stuff that they say because they've always said it, and yet they don't understand the impact that is on their programming. And so this goes back to like Mark Devine, the Navy SEAL we had a couple weeks ago, just talking about that. It's all about mental. You want to have a trained mind, a conditioned mind, and that is by being intentional about what you tell yourself about yourself. And so mental conditioning is huge. And I mean, I still have affirmations I read every single day. And if I have nerves before I make a big presentation, or before a sales call, or before leading a meeting, it's like I pull out my affirmations and I read them because it's a part of that mental conditioning. So I think you have vision, then self-talk, which would be conditioning. To a business person, it's not so much running laps and running sprints and doing weights in the business world. It's mental conditioning. It's your self-talk. Then the next thing is education. And I think this was a parallel where Alan was talking about skills, right? Okay, now you got to learn the fundamentals of how to do a bounce pass, and how to rebound, and how to block out, and how to shoot, and how to flick your wrist, and how to follow through. And that's, we provide education. It's personal development. It's teaching people the skills. This is how you ask for referrals. This is how you close the sale. This is how you run a meeting. This is what you look for on a resume. Thinking about leaders, this is how you determine this is how you identify potential future leaders. Here's how you create a career path. Here's how you create a compensation plan. I mean, there's all these different things that our team does in terms of the skills that we teach a client. But it's like you have to actually learn the knowledge, and that's about personal development. And on some level, I know I'm preaching to the choir here because you're listening, to this podcast, and hopefully you're plugged into our blogs and our social media, and we're giving away a ton of education for free. And we also have various levels that people pay for. Books, we have virtual training, we have our one-on-one coaching, which is core, and then speaking, where people bring us in to speak, and then consulting. So we have a whole full spectrum, a continuum of prices that we make education available, starting with free, going up to tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars for very large scale, long-term consulting projects, and even millions of dollars with some clients. But it's education. So there's vision, there's mental conditioning, and then there's education through personal development. There's the knowledge acquisition. Then I think the next thing is practice. It's activity. It's doing the thing. It's role playing is one end of that continuum, but then actually doing it live is another one. And that is part of what we do when we coach people. And I was just thinking in my mind, like I was watching the videos when I was preparing for the interview with Alan and then his partner, Drew, who we may try to bring Drew on at some point. I don't know if we'll do that, but watching the videos of Drew, who's doing most of the skills work with the actual players, and they're practicing, right? They're actually going through the motions. And you have to do the same thing in your business. You have to practice. You have to watch somebody do it. Then they have to teach you. They teach you how to do it. Then you watch them do it. Then you do it. Then they instruct you. Then you practice. It's like you're role playing. And I don't know why people in business are such sissies when it comes to role playing. Like, what is they're weenies about role playing? It's like they're afraid to do it. What do you think the people do? What do you think NBA players do all day? It's role playing, right? They practice, every day, like throughout the year. It's all role playing, and then there's only this little part of time where you're actually in the game. So we need to kind of get over our fear and our weakness about role playing, thinking about it's stupid. That is what professional athletes do. It's what Navy SEALs do, right? It's all drills. It's all scenarios. It's all practice and role playing. And so when we're coaching people, we do that. It's like, okay, now let's write it out. Let's create the script. Let's role play it. You say it to me, I'll say it back to you. Now go do it. Let's record it. Send me your recording. Let's listen to your recording. Let's break it down. When they said this, why did you say that? What happened? Let's watch your video. I mean, it's a core part of coaching is actually the activity and the role playing. And then I think the next thing is schedule, is the routine. It's creating routine and then just reinforcing that repetitive nature of this is what you do all day, every day, and getting you on a systematic schedule. And it's one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself is figure out, what does your perfect week look like? What does your ideal week look like? Map out every minute of the day of how you're going to spend your time. It's the same reason to do a financial budget with your money. If you can't spend your money properly on paper first, you're never going to spend it properly in real life first. It disappears. You buy stupid stuff. You buy things you don't need. You end up getting in debt and doing all this stuff with credit because you don't have a plan. A schedule is just a plan for your time. Just like a budget is a plan for your money, a schedule is a plan for your time. You have to have this schedule, this map of how you're going to use your time. And then the last thing is accountability. It is that ongoing reinforcement. And I loved what Alan said. where you put yourself like under the microscope. He called it a spotlight. We say, we try not to be in the spotlight. That's talking about ego. But when you put yourself under the microscope, you commit publicly, get accountability in your life by telling people what you're going to do, because they're going to help make sure you close that execution gap. And you have to have that accountability. You have to have people in your life asking you, you said you were going to do this. Did you do it? If you didn't do it, why not? What was the breakdown, and what are we going to do about it? That is where you have to get yourself to, and you have to have that accountability. It's how results are created. But if you do these things, right? Like, I don't care how big your dream is, whatever you're sitting there listening, going, gosh, okay, how does this apply to my, my dream that I have? Or I want to break the sales record. I want to build a big team, or I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to grow my business. I want to make profits. I want to write a book. I want to be a speaker. I want to, whatever it is in your life that your goal is you sit there and you listen to this. This process is tested and true. You create a vision. You do the mental conditioning through positive self-talk. You do personal development to grow your education. Then you practice through activity. It's getting your activity up. Lots of reps, lots of practice, role playing, and then real life practice. Then you and then you lock down a schedule, and then you create the accountability to make sure that machine runs. And you do these things, and you get that machine running. Then what happens? Just think about it for a second. What happens if you do all of that? The results show up as a byproduct. Peak performance happens as the trail, as the wake of doing all these things. The results, you don't create the results, you create the habits, and the results show up as a byproduct of the habits. You don't create the results, you create the habits, and the results show up as a byproduct of the habits. So that is what we want you to do. We want to encourage you to create great habits. And hopefully listening to this podcast, engaging with our blog, reading our stuff for free, and is a good, that's what we want. And then we've got varying levels of accountability. We'll put you into virtual training. Hopefully one day we get you into one-on-one coaching so we can be working with you privately. But whatever it is in your life, this is the process that you go through, and it's all about creating these habits. You don't create the results. You create the habits, and the habits create the results. Well, that about wraps up the Action Catalyst podcast for this week. If you haven't yet, please log in to whatever your favorite medium is to listen to the show, and both rate this podcast and leave a comment, as that helps new prospective listeners determine if the show's really a good fit for them.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and screenshot this episode to share with your friends on social media. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst, and subscribe to our video podcast on YouTube. Thanks for listening.